Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of To The Point podcast. Hope you guys are all doing well. Made it to April 1st today, otherwise known as April Fool's Day. Also opening day in Major League Baseball, where we'll see every team take the field today. It all starts about 2 o'clock this afternoon, heading until 11 o'clock tonight when it comes to start time of games. Blue Jays throw the first pitch at 2:05. They're in the Bronx playing the Yankees. I'll get into that. Get into the big signing last night, late in the evening. Francisco Lindor, the shortstop of the now New York Mets, signing a huge extension that'll keep him there for likely the remainder of his career. And just the big paydays that people get in baseball now, it's just absurd how much money goes around to people who, quite frankly, don't win MVP awards, don't win Cy Youngs, but they get paid. Seems a crazy amount of money for being fifth in MVP voting, which is what Francisco Lindor did one season. But good player, but just crazy money for an average guy. Also talk about some NHL last night. The Toronto Maple Leafs beating Winnipeg Jets, so I'll dive into that. The Colorado Vegas out west, that's gonna be a tight race all year. Likely I think it's gonna be the best playoff series. I think they'll both get to the second round, play each other. I think it'll be the best series of the playoffs, and that could be a Stanley Cup final in my mind. But we're going to see it in the second round, so it's a good and bad thing in my opinion. Again, in regular year, I think the way those two teams are playing, they'd meet in the conference final. But it's an unconventional season. We'll see them likely play in the second round, and whoever comes out of that, I give a very good chance of winning the Stanley Cup if they can stay healthy and things of that nature. So we'll dive into that. But we're gonna start today talking about baseball. Like I said, it's April 1st. It's opening day. Excitement for sure. Baseball fans happy it's back. For me, I'm just happy spring training's over. It's a slog. It's really long when you have to go through day after day and you got to hear, the media talk about how good somebody looks in spring training. And I'm like, oh my God, who cares? Again, if you bat 400 in spring training, it means literally nothing to me. Nothing. Great. You have good mechanics. Your exit velocity is, whatever, your expected home run rate, whatever. Who gives a shit? When you get to the mound today and you start swinging, that's when it counts. That's when your batting average starts. That's when your exit velocity can start, and I'll listen to it and I'm going to take it all in. I'll talk about it here. Spring training is like an exhibition game. I really don't like. Tom Brady could stink an exhibition game. Max Scherzer, just putting it back to baseball, you give up 6 runs in an exhibition game. It literally means nothing. Sure, some kids need to have a good spring training to make an impression. But in my mind, listening to people, coaches that, played sports, coaches have a really good idea, managers in this case, know what the roster is going to be before spring training starts. And they may have a kid that they think could make a difference. And, his playing spring training doesn't really have that much to do with it. And it's just, they see him, and whether he gets on the mound, pitches well or not, I think, the whole training camp and, job opportunities and all these things, I think that's blown out of proportion, especially in recent years. Because quite frankly, I think coaches have their roster set before they head into training camp. And unless they see, Ken Griffey Jr. come into their facility, they're not going to change their mind. So, for the Blue Jays, great. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. comes in, loses a bunch of weight, check mark, great. They make some big signings. That's great. They had some tough injuries. Kirby Yates, Tommy John surgery done for the season, never got to pitch for the Blue Jays. They get Nate Pearson, who's their stud pitching prospect. He's hurt, not going to start the season. So that's a tough blow. And yesterday, it was announced that George Springer and Robbie Ray are going to start the season on injury list. So Springer, obviously, that's a big loss. He's everyday center fielder. I would say the best player on the roster right now, de facto leader. They do have depth in the outfield, so they'll be able to I think they'll likely put Randall Grichuk in center. They can move they can keep Gurriel in left, potentially put Kevin Biggio in right field today. They could also put Teoscar Hernandez if they don't want to DH him. So they have some options with their fielding. But the big thing for Springer is hopefully this is a minor injury for the Blue Jays because they need his bat. Again, he's going to be batting leadoff. That's such an important place to have a guy that you know is going to be a consistent hitter. Blue Jays haven't had one. In the past, they put in Pilar up there. We've seen Kevin Biggio has stretches where he was good, but he wasn't really a consistent leadoff hitter. Springer's been doing it for years in Houston. That's what he's comfortable with. And it's so important for the lineup. It sets the tone early. You get a guy on base the first time through, and then you get to the likes of Vladdy, you get to Bichette, and your other key bats, they can drive in runs. It leads to more earned runs, and it just sparks offense and gets the team going on the right foot. So that's going to be definitely on the forefront today. And Robbie Ray, for him being out, he is in their he's one of their top 5 pitchers. So they're likely either going to go with 4 early on in the season, or they could go to a TJ Zoik. He's a guy who's made the team, been in the organization for a while. They could go to a Trent Thornton, have him have a spot start, so to speak. So they'll have some options there, but definitely a tough blow to start the year for the Blue Jays. And they start there with a 3-game set in the Bronx. They got the Yankees, Garrett Cole versus Hyun-Jin Ryu today. Great pitching matchup. I think Garrett Cole coming into this season, has a lot to prove. Obviously fantastic in Houston. He was such a highly coveted free agent, gets over, $300 million like Francisco Lindor. And now I think you look at Cole, last year was okay, but it was pedestrian. It wasn't elite Garrett Cole stuff. So I think he's going to have a lot to prove this year to say to people in New York who can be quite temperamental, can be judgmental, and you starting to get fans back in the building. You're going to hear some boos if this team's struggling. He's going to want to come out today and really set the tone, in Yankee Stadium, show everybody what he's made of. And ultimately, he was signed to bring the Yankees a championship. And you look at the division, I mentioned it on the previous show, you got the Yankees, you got the Blue Jays, you got Tampa Bay. Can these teams separate themselves? I think they're all really close. The Blue Jays could make it interesting. I think they need to add more pitching, and that would make it even closer. I look at the Blue Jays pitching right now, and I say that's what's keeping the Yankees and Rays above them slightly. They got some really good bats in Toronto on paper, but I look at Roark and I look at, Steven Matz and a lot of these journeyman type guys, and I'm like, how can you spend all that money on hitters and be so cheap when it comes to, getting starters, or just getting starters that just, quite frankly, don't have it? So we'll see how the season starts. I think Blue Jays, the organization and Shapiro and Atkins in general are quite tentative. They like to ease into things, so I don't see many moves happening early in the season. I likely give every rotation guy at least 2 or 3 starts to see where they fit, and then they can reevaluate from there. But they start the Bronx, 3-game set, play today, off tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday. Then they head to Texas, where we'll see. They're expected to have full capacity. It is their home opener on Monday, so it wouldn't surprise me if you do see a full barn in Texas that night, and that'll be an interesting sight after a year where we seem to only be allowed to have 5 to 10 people in one gathering. So interesting there. But yeah, the 2:00 this afternoon, Jays Yankees season gets going. American League should be a lot of fun. Last night, it was about 3:00 in the morning. It was reported yesterday, Francisco Lindor said, I'll give you till opening day to give me an extension. After that, talks are done. He's a free agent at the end of this season, so he does have some leverage. The Mets traded for him with the Cleveland Indians earlier this offseason. So he could walk at the end of the year. That's a risk for sure after acquiring this player. But they got a deal done. And the deal is for 10 years, $341 million. Um, yeah, it's $34 million a season. Just, it's crazy money to me. And yes, Francisco Lindor is a great shortstop, very good defensively, has been a really, really good player for the Cleveland Indians. But the highest he's ever come to winning an MVP award is being voted fifth. Never even in the top three. And I look at, yeah, he's a really good defensive shortstop, but is he a game changer? He never was in Cleveland. He was, the 2016 team that made the World Series. I think that was more pitching than it was, hitting on that team. They had some good hitters. Lindor was part of that, but Kipnis, Hayward, just the team that they had, it was built more on just solid hitting. And looking at Lindor, is he better than Javi Baez? No. To me, he's not better, than Javi Baez. And, obviously this excites players because it gets the market going, it keeps it going. But how what teams are doing here is setting the standard. And we see other sports really, NBA has cut down their contracts in recent years. So the NBA, you can only sign a player to a 5-year deal. That's the max. NHL, a couple seasons ago in the CBA, it's 7 years. 8 years if you're homegrown talent, 7 years if you're leaving a team and signing as a unrestricted free agent. So that's the limit. We used to see 13-year deals from Ovi and Sid. Those are dead. They're still going like wildfire in baseball. Bryce Harper source signed a 13-year deal. Fernando Tatis Jr. signed a 12-year deal. Ronald Acuna Jr. signed a 10-year, $100 million deal in Atlanta. And I look at this and say, okay, Lindor is going to spend the rest of his career for the Mets unless things go really haywire. They have to move him, or for some strange reason, I don't know who's going to want that contract as he gets older. But likely he'll spend the rest of his career in New York. But if I'm New York, why do I want to give him 10 years? Apparently he wanted 12, which is just absurd, that he wanted another 2 years. And I get it. It's security. But I just think it's puzzling. Why baseball, a sport where, the owners are, a lot of owners are so cheap because you see them just shed salary. And honestly, I think it helps the good players because they get all the money. I went over the preview. There's a lot of bad teams, but there's a few teams that are mediocre that have these 13-year contracts, $300 million players that never even get close. Bryce Harper, 2 years in Philadelphia, has not made the playoffs since signing that deal. We'll see what happens with Tatis. I think the kid's really good. But 13 years after he's only played 142 games in the bigs, there's a high level of risk there. And yes, the Mets on paper, they've improved a lot. They got Pete Alonso. They got, obviously Jacob Degrom, one of the best pitchers in baseball. Thor should be back around June after Tommy John surgery. Michael Conforto has been a really consistent guy for them. But why is Francisco Lindor, so coveted? I don't think he changes a franchise. He's never changed life for the Indians. They made that final in 2016. He was a young player. Since then, they've never gotten back. So we'll see. I think the Mets are an intriguing team this year. They got the Nationals today. It'll be Degrom versus Scherzer, two of the best pitchers in all of baseball. The National League East should be a battle all season. You got the Mets, you got the Nationals, Marlins. The list goes on. The Atlanta Braves, who I talked about a lot, they're strong. So who knows where this is going to go? But I just look at this contract and say, was it really necessary? Of course, you don't want to let him walk, but the precedent that teams are doing with the Machado type deal and Harper and even Garrett Cole to some extent. I mean, pitchers, are only pitching every fifth day, and they're getting these massive deals. Like, it doesn't make sense. But that's what ownership groups have done. They've given players these huge contracts. And thinking of baseball and their structure, I can't see this lasting too much longer. The next CBA, it's got to be worked out because, quite frankly, I know why players want to do it because we see what free agency is like in baseball. The money's not always there. It takes a long time. I think it's physically draining. So you get long-term security, then you don't have to go through it your entire career. More power to you. But I just think it's really strange that we see a guy like Francisco Lindor get that kind of money after what he's done thus far in his career. Before we leave baseball, there's also some news. Dustin May, the big redhead for the Los Angeles Dodgers, has been named the fifth starter. I said this on the previous show. I thought he would be. David Price is going to pitch out of the bullpen. I still think David Price will get some starts. Again, injuries play a role in that, but when it comes to the playoffs, I think David Price is the perfect guy to put in the bullpen. Maybe you start him now as the closer. I think that's an interesting one. Maybe they want to keep him stretched out because he is obviously a starting pitcher on a normal day. But interesting to see what happens with the Dodgers team, how they use all their pitchers. They got so much depth. They got so many options. I think for them, it's just more about finding the right cohesion and sticking with it. Dustin May is a young guy. Julio Urias is a young guy. You want these guys to pitch because they're the next wave. Again, this ownership group will spend money. And you got Trevor Bauer. You still have Kershaw, Walker Buehler under contract, no doubt. But getting May, getting Urias working with these other pitchers, getting them comfortable, it sets you up because David Price is not going to be in the major leagues that much longer. He sat out all of last year. Who knows what he's got left in the tank. And, playing for such a long time, maybe he just wants to hang them up sooner rather than later. He's pitched a lot of baseball, a really good pitcher for a long time. But, I'm not going to pretend to read his mind, but he could be thinking of an exit strategy until, leaving baseball or finding something else to do. So interesting point there. So, yeah, opening day. Enjoy. We got Houston, Oakland tonight, 11. That's always a good matchup, good rivalry, good series. The Mets, Nationals, Yankees, Blue Jays, Dodgers, Rockies at 5. So lots to watch today, opening day, and we'll see what happens. Pivoting to the NHL. The NHL last night, kind of a couple slow nights this week. Some COVID news, which I'll touch on, has really kind of put a damper on this week and on the season a little bit. But, that didn't stop the Toronto Maple Leafs from going into Winnipeg and defeating the Winnipeg Jets 3-1. The game was really over after the first period. Winnipeg was kind of discombobulated the whole night, did not have their A game. Credit to Toronto, they knew that, and they took advantage. Austin Matthews scored on a turnover in the first period after Tucker Pullman ran into his own player. Then we see Zach Hyman win a puck battle in front. He taps one home, and then they later score a shorthanded one to make it 3-0. Winnipeg added one, but after Morrissey in the power play. But Campbell shut the door after that, and then the Leafs take the 2 points. So not every game has headlines to me. I think it's something that's overblown because you need to talk about the team that you're covering. You need to talk about every game and what. It's not about headlines from one particular game for me. It's just about generalities. What can you see? If you see things good or bad from a team in every game, then you're seeing familiarity. You're seeing cohesion. And that's important. The past week, I think Austin Matthews has really shown that he's back. That's not just last night. He's starting to score goals again. That's the key sign. I think defensively, you're starting to see his game come back. When he was hurt, nobody can tell me he's the same defensive player when it comes to being in the position. That play he made on Thomas Chabot last week, that was more about Thomas Chabot having a mind cramp and doing something really stupid when he should have just went down the ice and scored the game winner. Matthews stuck his foot out. He can either be, fake trying to block a shot, or he can, break up a play, lifting his little pirouette foot there. But last night, a couple key defensive plays on Scheifele. I think he's always, in the past 4 or 5 games, he's just always in the right defensive position. And that's about being locked in too. It's not just about scoring goals. In the past, that's all it was. Matthews, prior to this season, Austin Matthews was not a complete player. To even say he was a really good defensive player prior to this year, I think you're high. But he's learned. He's learned how to do it. I see him play against Matthews the other night. He just bodies him off the puck. He's stronger than him. He knows where to be. He's with his man the whole time. His defensive presence is there. So credit to him. The Leafs top line scored 2 goals in the first period last night. Just past couple games, we've seen them together. And I've said this all year, and I'll continue to say it. Zach Hyman should play with Matthews and Marner. It's so obvious. It's so easy. But I don't know if it's Dubas or Keefe. They just want to try to make it harder on themselves and lose games because of it. Put Hyman on the top line, not Joe Thornton. Joe Thornton should never practice with those 2 players again. In practice, you do line rushes. It should never be Joe Thornton. If that comes up in your timeline, you should be screaming because you're like, why is Joe Thornton playing up there? He's perfect on that 4th line. For right now, him, Spets, Kerfoot, they can do it. Do I buy that it works long term when you got the playoffs and you're playing every other night? I have my doubts because you got 2 guys that are older, especially Joe. And I don't know if those 2 could play in a line together for the rest of the year. I wouldn't want to put my money on it. But in the past, again, we're talking about habits. We're talking about cohesion. The past week, that line's been great. Kerfoot scores a shorthanded goal last night. Kudos to him. I still think he's a liability when it comes to a player, but he scored a goal, so good for you. But for Winnipeg, again, we're talking about habits. They were playing really good hockey prior to this loss. I'm not going to bury Winnipeg for having one bad game. And that can happen both ways. I mean, I listen to a show called Overdrive sometimes. I think they talk about the Leafs glowingly when they win, and then when they lose, they bury them. I think it's a game. You're going to have a good game, you're going to have a bad game. If you have 4 or 5 in a row where you stink, that's a habit. Buffalo Sabres, they win a game last. Are they a good team now? No, they still fucking suck. They lost 18 in a row prior to last night. And then you can look at the team that they beat. Philly, are they a good team? They beat Buffalo. No. Philly's been terrible for weeks now. That's the habit. It's not about one game looking at it and saying, okay, this is this team. You look at the body of work and then you make your judgments. Again, the past 2 games, John Tavares, William Nylander, that line with Galchenyuk has looked really good. Thought Saturday they played great. Monday they didn't score, but they were involved. Last night they were fair. Now does that mean Alex Galchenyuk is this savior left winger? He was the 3rd overall pick 8 years ago, and now he's finally found his calling. No, I think you need to see a bigger body of work. I think he's had a few good games in a row here, and that's all you can ask for. But for me, the media, people, fans, you can do a better job by just looking at the sample size. Not just 1 or 2 games. Evaluate stretches, 5 games, 10 games, a week. You can do even a week, I know the Toronto media guys can't get enough of talking about them. Let's just do the week, Say, okay, we played Edmonton Monday night. Played pretty good. But we went into overtime and we turned the puck over, and the best player in the world made a great pass. The best defenseman in the Canadian division, he scored a goal. Tough potatoes. Last night, we made it really tough on Winnipeg. They were pretty lifeless, but guess what? We took advantage of them. We played our system. We won the game. We've been doing that a lot lately. We got a 3-point lead in this division. Hooray for us. Great. Saying, the biggest example is when Toronto lost to Ottawa, when they blew that 5-1 lead. And that was, now this is the Toronto Maple Leafs. No, it's not their best or worst after one game. That's who you are. I think of Ottawa this year. Ottawa started off horrendous. You look at them now, they battle every game they're in. They're playing Montreal tonight. I guarantee you it's going to be a good game. They played Toronto tough all year. So are they going to get shelled on a given night? Sure. But that's not indicative of who they are as a team this whole season. Again, Detroit, Buffalo, Anaheim to an extent, they stink because pretty much any given night they stink. More often than not, they are junk. But last night, Winnipeg was trash. They didn't bring it. The game didn't have much life to it, which was disappointing because I like Toronto Winnipeg. If I have to watch a game, I'll rather watch Toronto Winnipeg than I would Toronto Edmonton, which I realize nobody agrees with, but I don't care. But does that mean Winnipeg's junk because they won bad game? No. But I know you're probably listening to this saying, why is this coming up today? I could have brought it up, this is at podcast number 90 for me. I could have brought it up in episode 1, but it's honestly, it's the truth that picking one game and defining a player, that happens all the time. Like, for example, we're talking to the Leafs, so I'll just do that. Alex Galchenyuk played Saturday night, played great. Don't get me wrong, played really well. And they talked about him Monday like he was more Rocket Richard. You see Alex Galchenyuk was getting shot opportunities and getting assists, played really well. He played one game. He's on his 7th team in 4 years. Was that just forgotten? He's give him a sample size. But one game now he's Gordie Howe. One game does not define a career. One game does not define a team. And looking at the past week, Maple Leafs played good hockey. Ottawa gave them a tough run last Thursday. They win the game. But they played well and deserved to win it. Einthoven Forsberg played really well. Saturday, they were a lot better than Edmonton. Mike Smith played fantastic hockey, make it interesting. But, they get the win in overtime. Great. Monday night, wash, you could say. I'm not going to say that they lost because Michael Hutchinson was starting, because I think that's a lazy narrative. They didn't lose because of him. He played pretty well. Edmonton, McDavid was better than 34. They beat them. That's going to happen. He is better than 34. But again, sample size, and just getting on this. Jack Campbell 7-0 this year. That's a fair sample size. I think he hasn't lost, so he's been very good. Very good this year for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But, and there's always a but with me. Sometimes on the butt of the joke, but that's for another topic for another day. 7-0, you can't argue with that. But they played Saturday, right? They played Saturday against Edmonton to get the win. Practice Sunday, Campbell doesn't. That's fine. Maintenance day, go get his nails done. That's fine. Then you get to Monday, and he can't start. But he played Saturday, so why can't he start? And he didn't even get on the bench. He didn't back him up, but so you start Hutchinson. Okay, you get a point with your third string goalie in there. Who's going to complain about that? But then he can start last night. So what I'm getting at here is the Leafs do not have faith that he can stay healthy. If I'm a Leaf fan, I'm very happy with the way my team's playing. However, I have zero confidence in my goaltending right now heading into the playoffs. Frederik Andersen's hurt, and we know nothing about it. The Leafs are saying nothing. He'll be reevaluated in this amount of time. He's not skating right now. So how much confidence do you have he's going to be ready to come to the playoffs or play well? Can't be more than 20%. And you got Jack Campbell. When he's in the net, he's great. But he's never played a playoff game in his life. So that's one thing. And the guy is injury prone as hell. And if he goes down, which in the playoffs, you play every second day. So it goes game, day off, maybe a practice, then a game. So what happened Saturday to Monday can happen. Unless Hutchinson's going to start game 2 of a playoff series. And you may say, okay, well, Campbell would start that game if it was the playoffs. Okay. You can't say that definitively. When has he done it in his career? The most games he's ever played in his career in one season is 30. when Jonathan Quick went down in LA. He's always hurt. And clearly they're worried about him getting hurt again. And in the playoffs, you tweak something, you don't have time to get ready, to get better. Read Doug Gilmour's book. Read about all the injuries he had to play through. He didn't practice. He had to take injections before games. And goaltenders, they normally say, check please, I'm out. And if I'm Toronto, you got to think about adding a goaltender at the trade deadline. And maybe they think Frederik Andersen will come back and be healthy. But if you honestly want to go into the playoffs with Jack Campbell and Michael Hutchinson as your 1-2, then you deserve to lose. Because Jack Campbell may win you around. He may get you wherever. But if he goes down, you know you're done. Because there's no team. The Colorado Avalanche this year, Vegas, Tampa, they're not winning a cup with their third-string goalie. No team is. You're not winning. You're not going through the gauntlet of the playoffs with a third-string goaltender. So, if I'm Toronto, you want a left winger. To me, you still want a bottom six defenseman. Travis Dermott can go, but this has come up, and I think it's at the forefront. You want to add a goalie. He may sit on the taxi squad the rest of the year. You may not need him, but I'd like to have the security blanket than have an anchor dragging me down. So, a few names. And this might scar Leaf fans, but I don't care. Jonathan Bernier is available. So UFA at the end of the year. He's a pure rental from the Detroit Red Wings. He's actually played really good hockey in Detroit. He's playing for a team that stinks, and he's got good numbers. He's turned his career around since when he was with Toronto, if you recall. They were 18-wheeler, like going off the cliff. So they didn't do much to help him when he was there either. But he's a guy. Ryan Miller in Anaheim. Again, he's an older guy, but I like him more than I like Michael Hutchinson. He's got playoff experience. Again, he may never hit the ice, which you don't want him to, but it's a security blanket, and he's there. So those are a couple guys that come to mind. I think you're going to see teams look to add a veteran backup. There's also Thomas Greiss in Detroit. He's a guy maybe teams would take a look at, but you want to add somebody if I'm Toronto. But that's just my 2 cents, because Colorado had Grubauer, Pavel Francouz, and Michael Hutchinson last year. Grubauer went down. Then Francouz got hurt. They had Michael Hutchinson. They lost to Dallas in the second round, Game 7 overtime. Colorado was a way better team than Dallas, but they didn't have any goaltending, so Dallas beat them. I think Colorado's in the goalie market right now too. They want another goaltender because they know what happened last year. Grubauer's playing out of his mind right now, but if he goes down, they got Hunter Miska right now and Jonas Johansson, who they acquired from Buffalo, as their safety blankets. You're done. You're done before you hit the ice, and the players know it. So adding a goalie is really imperative. Could you pull one of those youngsters out of Ottawa? I'd have more faith in those youngsters than I would Michael Hutchinson. Would they part with one of them? Who knows? But we'll see. But before we pivot from this topic, I got to give the Leafs credit. And I'm going to say something right now that I thought I'd never say on this podcast. And the Toronto Maple Leafs are the best team in the NHL. They are. You look at their forwards. You look at the defense coming around. Zach Bogosian, the ad. Jack Campbell. Having your backup goaltender go 7-0 undefeated. This team's legit. And I think they're clearly the best team. April Fools. No, the Toronto Maple Leafs are not the best team in the NHL, but I just thought I'd throw in an April Fool's joke for everybody. They're fair, but April Fools, everybody, and anybody who fell for that, well, sorry, but you got to remember what day it is today. For Winnipeg, Blake Wheeler left the game, so I hope he's okay after seeing the Aaron Ekblad injury. I hated to see that. I think he would have gotten Norris votes for sure. Florida, I hope we can keep chugging without him, but big loss. He's playing over 25 minutes a game this year. becoming that number one defenseman that they look to draft. So Blake Wheeler, important cog for Winnipeg. You get Toronto, Winnipeg again tomorrow night. So Toronto playing tomorrow night, not Saturday. So that probably rattles some people around the world. But there's also March Madness Saturday night, so better sporting event anyway. So enjoy that. Last night, Calgary Vancouver was postponed. Again, COVID issues. You had Adam Gaudette a couple of days ago announced that he had tested positive. 4 other staff and team members were close contacts. So the game was postponed due to precautionary reasons. This is the second postponement in the Canadian division after the Montreal-Edmonton game. And then, Montreal had 4 games postponed after that. So they're still trying to make up hockey. But I'll be interested to see what happens. You get Calgary, we're supposed to play Vancouver. Vancouver has not played in over a week. They're scheduled to play Friday against Edmonton. I don't know what's going to happen there. But they obviously would get that. They're going to have to do some more testing with players and such. But we're getting down to it. The season's supposed to end on May 11th. That's with canceled games and postponements. It's supposed to end May 11th. But we're all going to wait and see what happens. They got to make up games. Obviously, it may come down to points percentage for teams this year to make the playoffs. It sounds perverse, but I still don't believe every team's going to play the same amount of games as others. I just look at this situation. They're going to have to reschedule this game. They're going to have to, they've reworked games all year. The states are still not 100% clear of COVID. So who knows what's going to happen with the league and everything. We just got to hope that we can get through this season relatively healthy and then reevaluate from there. But Calgary, Vancouver postponed. Still waiting to hear if any other, the next few games will be postponed as well. But the NHL's got to be hoping that there's no other positive tests, that everybody's safe, because losing another couple games could really kill them when it comes to scheduling and just fitting everything in before the season, before the season's over and we head into the postseason. So that was postponed late last night. Colorado, Vegas. I mentioned that earlier. They didn't play last night, but they had 2 different games. And I look at these 2 teams and say, wow, I don't know who's better. You look at the overall skill of the Colorado Avalanche. You got Nathan McKinnon, one of the best players in the world. You got Cale Makar, who Colorado's plays out west. They sometimes start like 9:30 games, 10 o'clock. Watch a period before you go to bed and just watch number 8. This kid is unbelievable. His skating, just his hockey IQ. The sky's the limit for him, and he's already one of the best defensemen in the NHL. He'll win a Norris Trophy within the next 2 years. Lock it in right now. I have it on record. They got Mikko Rantanen, who's got 21 goals on the season now. Now he's tied for second in the league, 3 goals behind Matthews. I wouldn't rule him out at making a push at Matthews because him, McKinnon, and Landeskog are chugging on all cylinders right now, and they're deadly when they're on the ice together. I'd say the second best line in the NHL behind the perfection line. And you got Landeskog, still a guy who doesn't get talked about a lot, still a really productive player. Grubauer, I think he'll get Vezina Trophy votes. I think Vasilevsky's got it right now, but who knows? Still some game hockey to go. If Colorado can go on a run, potentially finish first in the West, and Grubauer's got some really good statistics, it wouldn't shock me to see him win the award either. So he's great. And you got Vegas. Again, Marc-Andre Fleury's been great this year. Shea Theodore having another really productive season. Mark Stone having the best offensive season of his career. You still got Alex Pietrangelo there. Robin Leonard's coming back. They lose to LA last night. See, LA is an inferior team. But with the win, Colorado just blew out Arizona 9-3. And it just shows you what they can do. Jonas Donskoy, who used to play for the San Jose Sharks, was really a castaway, kind of a third-line guy. He gets a hat trick in the first period last night for Colorado. He's got 15 goals on the season. a guy you don't really hear talked about a lot is Jonas Donskoy. He has a 4-point night. They they just can score at all centers. Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, fourth line center, had a goal and assist last night. Not known for his offensive abilities. I just think top to bottom, this team is unbelievable. If I'm Joe Sakic, I'm adding another goalie as depth because I'm not letting what happened last year happen again. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Didn't want to go George Bush there. So it's just, I think these two teams are so close. They're separating themselves from the Minnesotas and the St. Louis Blues and Arizona of the world, but I think this is two Mack trucks waiting to collide, and we'll see who can finish first. Again, Colorado is currently in first place in this division. Vegas does have a game in hand, but they still play a few more times. Those will be important. But this Colorado may be the most entertaining team to watch in the NHL. Just the way McKinnon plays and Makar and their high tempo. You still have guys that can get down dirty. You got Kadri there. Burakovsky's a guy who has some skill, but he's another guy that's just kind of gritty. He doesn't give you a lot of space, and he kind of brings that edge to the game for Colorado. They got a whole mix of guys that just make a great team. And I've been saying this. I think Vegas has the best built team in the NHL when it comes top to bottom, first line to fourth line, first D to 6D, how they've fabricated their roster. I think it's pretty impressive and honestly really compelling and interesting from Kelly McCrimmon and co. I mentioned Donskoy getting a hat trick last night. We've seen 4-goal games this year from Rocco Grimaldi and Andrew Kopp. These guys aren't guys that you would say, okay, these guys scored 4 goals in a game. You think Austin Matthews or McDavid or Rantanen. But I thought I'd just bring up some surprise stories this year. And top of the list for me is Carter Verhaeghe. Verhaeghe was in Tampa Bay. He was originally drafted by the Toronto Maple Leafs, cast off, really thrown under a bus, kind of driven over it. Florida just picked him up off the scrap heap and said, we'll give you a chance. Verhaeghe's got 17 goals this season. Hat trick the other night. He's just a worker. You look at him, you say, that guy doesn't have that much, elite skill. No, he doesn't, but he's got a really strong work ethic. I love the way he attacks pucks. He gets to the front and then he's not afraid to get in the dirty areas. And he's going to have a 20-goal season. I mean, this guy, he scored shorthanded goals this year. He's scored on the power play, obviously 5-on-5. He's just a really complete player. It's good to see a guy who's, wasn't given much of a chance early in his career, really thrived this year under Joel Quenneville, which I think is something that you can say a lot. Hornquist is a guy who's probably looked at Pittsburgh. Jimmy Rutherford said, okay, he's done. He comes to Florida. He's found new life. And, this Florida team's super impressive. They're tied with Tampa in points. And, they're without Barkov right now. They're without Hornquist. They're without Anthony Duclair. Ekblad's out for the year. So can they hold it together? I wouldn't doubt this team. They're resilient. They got a lot of guys that seem to have something to prove every night, and they've done it consistently all year. I also got Alex DeBrincat. Alex DeBrincat's he's an interesting player, one of the best shots in the NHL, but he's already got 19 goals. He's still in the Rocket Richard race, so to speak. I think him and Patrick Kane have so much chemistry. I really like the cut of their jib together. I think they both bring a lot to the table. Kane can obviously score, but his passing ability with DeBrincat's ability to finish really makes the two a deadly combination. And these surprise stories are all positive ones. I could do some negative ones. I think Seth Jones had a disappointing season, and I love Seth. I think he's the second best defenseman in the NHL. But Columbus is struggling. He's struggling. You got to put him on the list when it comes to players I expected more from, and I just haven't. Another disappointing surprise is Jamie Benn. Jamie Benn had a great playoff last year. I thought we'd see a little bit more from him. He looks gassed. I watched Dallas, and he just looks like he's got nothing left. And maybe last year with the limited break, took it all out of him. And it's perfectly fair. We haven't seen Sagan or Bishop play this year because off-season surgeries. He's been sort of by himself with Radulov and co. But Jamie Benn just doesn't look like the same horse that we saw in the playoffs and bring it night in, night out. And finally, a good surprise story for me, a guy I root for, Max Comtois for the Anaheim Ducks, leads the team in points. Um, just a good guy, a captain of the World Juniors. Paid his dues down in San Diego, playing in the AHL team. Now getting a regular shift in NHL. Looks like an NHL player. I give him a ton of credit for going through that and coming out the other side. I think he's a winner. He's got all the intangibles to be a winner, and just his leadership and the way he handles himself, speaks volumes at who this guy is as a player and most importantly as a person. But more NHL action tonight, full slate of games. We'll tee them up tomorrow. We'll see Ottawa get back on the ice after a week as they host Montreal. Some other fun games. Pittsburgh, Boston tonight. Pittsburgh has been on fire. They're trailing Washington and the Islanders, but they've won 6 of the last 7. Crosby's really fine this game, so we'll see what Boston can do to kind of contain Pittsburgh in their winning ways right now. That brings us to the Miami Open. We're going to talk about some tennis. And quite frankly, it's been the tournament of Bianca Andresscu. Bianca won the 2019 U.S. Open. She took the world by storm because, a month prior, she had won the Rogers Cup. And that was huge, obviously winning on Canadian soil. But what she's done to back that up, she hasn't really done anything. For a calendar year, give or take, she did not play competitive tennis. She was injured. She had different problems with her, and she didn't play. The whole pandemic, she did not play. So she won that in 2019. Now it's 2021, and she's finally starting to come back. She played briefly at the Australian Open, was out early. She went to a tournament after that, made the semifinal. We see her now at the Miami Open. It's one of the bigger non-major events of the year, and she's having a great run. She's won 3 3-set matches so far, with 2 of those 3 going over 2 hours and 30 minutes. So she's showing her stamina. We've seen some signs of injury where she's called her trainer, and that's always been like a calling card of her. I think that might just be a ploy for her to make herself centered. But, she wins against Soribes Tormo last night, getting to the semifinal here. It's impressive. I don't know how much she's going to have left in the tank because she played over 2 hours and 30 minutes last night again. And she'll be playing tonight against Maria Sakkari, who upsetted Naomi Osaka yesterday in really quick order. So she'll be fresh. She'll be ready for Bianca. But the most promising thing for Andresscu is that she's playing tennis. We've seen for over a calendar year she did not play. And getting the reps, getting the opportunity to compete here is so important because this will gear her up for the French Open in June, for Wimbledon, for the U.S. Open later. Just playing tennis without injury is the main thing. Can you play without discomfort? Can you play feeling like you were at the U.S. Open before the injuries and everything that happened? So I look at this as a very positive tournament for her. She's had to play some tough opponents. She got through them. She could have played Naomi Osaka, so she gets Maria Sakkari. That's a much easier matchup for Bianca, obviously. Naomi had won 23 straight matches prior to yesterday's loss. She would have came in a huge underdog. But, I give her a really good chance of winning tonight. And then she'll meet the winner of Ash Barty and Elina Svitolina in the final if she wins. And again, who knows? Ash Barty's world number 1 and Svitolina's in the top 10 as well. But we'll see what comes of this. But I thought it was good for her for getting back on the court. Her match has been entertaining, and they start around like 9:30 at night, so they can go a bit long. But she's battled through this tournament. She's gotten to where she is now because of her perseverance, and we'll see what comes out of her tonight when it comes to her aggression and how she handles herself on the court. And I could talk about a few other things. Daniil Medvedev got upset last night by Bautista Agut. So he's out. You got Rublev, who's really probably the favorite now. He's playing some great tennis. Still have Tsitsipas, who's in the draw as well in Miami in the men's side. But I'm going to talk briefly. Tomorrow, I'm going to be recording a podcast with Matt Wright as we have the whole tournament about March Madness. And, just the craziness of UCLA Bruins going from the play-in game, playing Michigan State, beating them in overtime, and now they find themselves in the Final Four, beating Michigan the other night, 51-49, and they'll now play the number 1 overall seed, Gonzaga. Now, I did not have UCLA going to the Final Four, I'll tell you that. Such an interesting story. UCLA's been playing great basketball for them. They've won 2 games in overtime already in this tournament, beating Alabama in overtime, so they get that win. And they're intriguing for sure. They're just 11 seed. You don't expect them to be here, but they're going to play Gonzaga. And 2 nights ago, Gonzaga beat USC handily. It was honestly one of the most impressive college basketball games I've ever seen a team play. I never thought Gonzaga was worried. I never thought they got flustered. Jacob Timme was getting whatever he wanted earlier. Jalen Suggs had the best game of the tournament by far for him. And it was over. After about 10 minutes, you knew the game was over. I started flipping between different things because I said, Gonzaga is just going to destroy them. They beat them by 19. It could have been by more than that. It was more of a 30-point win. It was an ugly loss for USC. And, UCLA, Gonzaga puts up 80, 90 points easy. And you look at UCLA, they put up 51 against Michigan. Michigan couldn't shoot. That was the big reason UCLA gets through. Gonzaga can score against anybody. We've seen that all year. It does not matter. UCLA is a decent defensive team, but unless you got guys on 2-3 guys on Timme, well, then Jalen Suggs is going to be open for a 3, or IE is going to be open for a 3. So you try to double this team that's going to burn you. And I don't know what the strategy is going to be for UCLA, but containing Jacob Timme early is imperative. He gets the team going. He gets those first few buckets of the game in the paint. After that, they settle in. They can start shooting threes. They can drive, and then they start playing that crisp offense that we've seen all season long. And Gonzaga is 2 wins away from having an undefeated season. That would be insane for this team. And it also would be Gonzaga's first national championship in the history of the program. I think they're a power school already, but getting a national championship, putting some respect on that name when it comes to Gonzaga, would really do a lot for the mass media. But they play Saturday. We'll also see Baylor play Houston. I think we'll see Gonzaga Baylor in the final. But if UCLA is going to win this tournament, I think they'll have to beat 3 of the 4 number 1 overall seeds, which is just so interesting. Obviously, Illinois bowed out early, but I think they'd have to beat Michigan. They'd have to beat Gonzaga. They'd have to beat Baylor in order of that, 1-1-1 to finish the tournament. But we'll see. Michigan, obviously a tough loss for them. Great season in the Big Ten, battling Illinois, battling Ohio State, even some other decent schools in there. But Houston, Baylor, you got Gonzaga, UCLA. So that's Saturday night. National championship game on Monday. Me and Matt Wright will talk about that in the podcast tomorrow. Tee you guys up, talk about everything you need to know going on into it. But just a great tournament so far, and to see 11 make it this far is always interesting. Before we wrap today, I'm going to talk about the Toronto Raptors. They've lost 13 of their last 14. They're done. They were done before, but they had that COVID problem. They had everybody out for COVID, so they kind of had this excuse to say, well, we're not really that bad. COVID's really ran through us, and our best players are out, and we can't do much about it, which there's truth to that for sure. But Charles Barkley didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to hear it. He said, and I just look at this, I think of Barkley on TNT when they asked about the Raptors, and he said, why are we talking about the Raptors? They're irrelevant. And I agree with him. They're not, you lose 13 out of 14, you have all these COVID problems, but it doesn't matter because you got all your players now and you're still not winning. You have Siakam on the floor, you have Van Fleet, you have Anunoby. But so you're still losing. They won one game against Denver. It's irrelevant now because you're losing. They lose to Detroit Monday night for the 3rd time in 3 weeks. They lose to Oklahoma City last night, who dressed basically a G League roster. It's startling to me. And Kyle Lowry, you don't trade him, okay? But now he's got a foot problem. He's out 7 to 10 days. So if you still wanted to make a push for the playoffs, well, you don't have a starting point guard. You don't have your starting point guard. So it's just a mess. I think you had to have traded Lowry, and they didn't do it. And I don't think he's coming back. And for Raptors fans that think you do, well, maybe you'll be right and I'll be wrong. But I don't know. I just think Kyle's at the end of his career. He's 35 years old. He's going to want a chance to win a championship. This currently fabricated Raptors team is not going to compete for a championship. Can they make the playoffs next year with a few additions? Sure. But are you going to acquire a superstar? Because that's what you need to do in the NBA. If you do not have a superstar, you're not winning a championship, period. And I don't know if they're going to do it. And let's be quite frank, it's going to have to be through trade because no superstar is signing in Toronto. That's been proven in the NBA. It's not conjecture. It's just a fact. So, but a lot of moving parts. And for the Raptors, losing 13 out of 14, losing to OKC last night, that was the white flag completely. It's just, okay, we're done. We're in Tampa. We got COVID. It's a tough year. We'll use that excuse. So let's go rebuild. And I think the players will do that. I think for management, they got to look deeper beyond that and say, what went wrong here? And is this really what we need? Is this how we're going to win? Addressing it early and being forefront is always the right answer. So we'll see what happens there. But that's going to do it for today's podcast. Like I said, I'm going to be back tomorrow. We'll talk about everything tonight. Going to be doing another podcast tomorrow with Matt Wright about March Madness. A lot of hockey over the weekend. Baseball starting. UFC coming back in a few weeks. We got NBA in full swing. So lots happening with the NFL draft at the end of the month. So enjoy it all. Happy April Fool's Day to everybody out there. And to all the listeners, thank you for supporting me. I appreciate it. And stay safe. Don't be the butt of the joke if you can. And either way, we'll talk soon.